Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Grand Hotel in Malahide for what is the 8th meeting of the Citizens' Assembly. I would like to welcome all of you joining us online, and I welcome the observers present, and of course I welcome the members, as I've done so already this morning. Today we begin our consideration of our third topic, how the state can make Ireland a leader in tackling climate change. I want to begin by exploring what our terms of reference mean and how we have interpreted them for the purposes of constructing a work programme for this weekend and for the next weekend in November. The wording of the Oireachtas resolution is clear and it's quite specific. It mandates that the Assembly do consider and make such recommendations as it sees fit and report to the Houses of the Oireachtas on, and I quote, how the state can make Ireland a leader in tackling climate change. That's the actual wording of the topic we've been asked to address, how the state can make Ireland a leader in tackling climate change. Implicit in this wording is an acknowledgement that climate change is real and climate change is happening. The wording of the resolution leaves no room for doubt as to how the Assembly should proceed in its deliberations. Our starting point must be that climate change is here and that it must be tackled. This starting point is also exactly where the scientific evidence tells us we should begin. The most recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which you'll hear referred to throughout the day and tomorrow as IPCC, makes a careful assessment of the extent to which climate change can be attributed to human activities. It concludes that, and I quote, human influence on the climate system is clear, end of quotation, and quote, it is extremely likely that human influence has been the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century, end of quotation. Our deliberations are concerned with how the state can best meet this challenge. In considering this in the construction of our work programme, the crucial phrase from the resolution, that's from the Oireachtas resolution, is how to make Ireland a leader. The phrasing speaks to ambition. It also speaks to taking definite action. It speaks to making recommendations which would put Ireland in the vanguard in relation to action on climate change. Now, this is no easy task. The challenge of having a comprehensive and robust discussion on such a wide-ranging and expansive topic cannot be underestimated, and I'm sure the members will have appreciated that from the papers we have sent to them in advance of the meeting. As always, I fully expect that our members will give the information with which they are presented their full attention and will interrogate all of the information which they will receive. The members' interest in this topic was clearly demonstrated when they decided back in January to bring forward our consideration of climate change. It was originally intended that this would be the final topic, but the members then decided that they wanted to dedicate a second weekend to its consideration, and I think that was very prudent. As if this was not enough, as if this was not evidence enough, I know there are members of the Assembly who joined at the very beginning because of their interest in this topic. I am hopeful that their patience will be rewarded with the excellent work programme we have before us this weekend. Before I briefly run through the weekend's programme, I want to acknowledge the work of the Expert Advisory Group. In advance of this weekend, I've been extremely fortunate to have had the benefit of a new expert advisory group which I have formed to advise me on this topic in accordance with the Oireachtas resolution, and the members will appreciate what I'm about to say because they will have heard the same remark in relation to the earlier expert advisory groups. I have found the assistance I've got invaluable. There's no other epithet to describe it, invaluable, and the same applies to the current expert advisory group. Now, just to tell you who they are. John Garry, who's Professor of Politics in Queen's University, remains as our constant member of the expert group, having also been with us for the 8th Amendment and also for the ageing population. he will remain a member for the other areas of the Assembly work, and we really value his knowledge of deliberative democracy, and he has been a very, very considerable assistance to us throughout the process. Now, in relation to the current topic, he is joined by Professor Anna Davies, professor at the School of Nature Sciences in Trinity College and Chair of Geography, Environment and Society. Anna is an expert in environmental governance, specifically focusing on consumption, sustainability transitions and public participation in environmental decision making. She's a member of the Climate Change Advisory Council, which you will hear about later. She is joined by Dr. Margaret Desmond, a Senior Research Fellow in Climate Change, Impacts and Adaptation in University College Cork. Her research is focused on the themes of climate change impacts, vulnerability and adaptation decision making. Also, another Corkonian, Dr. Anya Ryle, also joins the group. She's a qualified barrister and a senior lecturer in environmental law at UCC. And I may have committed a little mistake by referring to Corkonian, but that's where she is now. She's originally from Kerry. Her research focuses on environmental assessment, access to justice, climate law and governance, environmental law enforcement and the implementation of the Aarhus Convention. Then we have Dr. Peter Thorne, who is Centre Director of the Irish Climate Analysis Research Unit and is Professor of Physical Geography, Climate Science at Maynooth University. He is a lead author on the 5th assessment report of the IPCC, which I referred to earlier, and also a lead author in the 2014 US National Climate Assessment. And also with us on the expert advisory group is Dr. Dermot Torney, lecturer in environmental politics at the School of Law and Government at DCU. His research focuses on the comparative and global politics of climate change, particularly in the European Union, China and India, as well as in Ireland and other smaller European states. And then finally, more recently, Pat Gilroy, whom you'll be hearing this afternoon, joined the expert advisory group, and we thought he would be a useful member because of the crossover of our work with the work of the National Dialogue on Climate Change, which will be explained later, actually, what we mean by crossover. Pat is the chair of the National Dialogue on Climate Change. He is also a managing director of Designer Group, and he previously had the position of CEO of Dalkia Ireland and also Dalkia Veolia Environment in the UK. And I think some of you will be familiar with the name, as he was a former manager of the Dublin senior Gaelic football team. I don't know if that has any bearing on our topic, but I'm sure you'd be delighted to hear that. I'm very grateful to the expert advisory group for their assistance to date in the formation of the work programme. We have in fact been meeting since last June, and we have, myself, the Secretariat and the group have put a lot of work into framing the work programme. So to turn to focus on this weekend's speakers, discussions, topics. We will begin this morning by looking at the science of climate change. Conor Murphy, a senior lecturer in geography at the Irish Climate Analysis Research Unit S, known as ICARUS, at Maynooth University, will provide us with an overview of the physical science basis for climate change. That's our first That's where we start. And then following that, we will hear from the Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, Laura Burke. Laura will take us through climate change in a broader environmental context and will explain what is driving greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland. And then we will hear from Joseph Curtin, who's Senior Fellow on Climate Change at the Institute of International and European Affairs. And Joseph will explain the current efforts in Ireland and internationally in relation to tackling climate change. They're the papers we will be hearing in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we will hear from Dr. Peter Stott of the Climate Monitoring and Attribution Team in the UK Met Office. And we'll be hearing from Dr. Sanjay Varghese, who is a Head of Research in the Environment and Applications Division in Met Éireann. They will tell us about the impact of climate change both here and internationally. The timing of our deliberations is very opportune. The Minister for Communications, Client Action and Environment, Denis Naughton, published the National Mitigation Plan in June. The Minister also recently published the draft National Adaptation Framework, and that's the subject of consultation at the moment. And we will hear about these strategies later today when Brian Carroll, who's the Assistant Secretary in the Department, addresses the Assembly. Now, the Government has also recently announced the National Dialogue on Climate Change, which I have referred to earlier in the context of Pat Gilroy. That recognises that more effort is required to properly engage the wider public on the issue of climate change. Later today, we will have the opportunity to have the work of the Citizens' Assembly dovetail, otherwise crossover, with that work, in other words, the work of the National Dialogue on Climate Change. And when I'm referring to dovetailing and crossovering and whatever have you, crossing over, what have you, really we will have an opportunity to have the work of the Citizens Committee dovetail with the work of the National Dialogue. I'm hoping that aligning the Assembly's work to support the commencement of the National Dialogue on Climate Change will add to the national discourse on climate change and will ultimately be of benefit to the members as they consider the issue. I'm very much looking forward to that session later today with Pat Gilroy, because I do believe that our sessions this weekend will assist the National Dialogue, and I think it will be a very, very worthwhile exercise. Tomorrow we will look at energy policy in detail, and I will say more about that when we begin tomorrow morning. Now, I want to say something. I'm probably running a bit over time. I want to say something about submissions. Finally, before we commence our proceedings this morning, I want to say something about submissions, the submissions the Assembly has received. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of those who made submissions to the Assembly. In total, the Assembly received just over 1,200 submissions. I think I'm right when I say that this level of engagement on the topic of climate change is quite unprecedented in an Irish context. The quality of the submissions and the range of material provided is very impressive. The process was open from the 9th of June until the 11th of August. Submissions were invited across the full spectrum of issues in relation to climate change, but in particular we sought views on Ireland's energy, transport and agriculture sectors. In addition, because of our efforts to dovetail the work of the Assembly with the work about to be undertaken by the advisory group on the National Dialogue on Climate Change, we also sought submissions addressing this aspect. Submissions were received from advocacy groups and professionals, from academics with experience and expertise on the topic, and from individuals with a concern for the environment. A notable feature of the submissions was that they are solution-focused, with detailed analysis of existing policy presented and suggestions for alternative ideas presented. These proposals included suggestions for action at a national, international and European Union policy level, as well as suggestions on how an individual could simply reduce his or her carbon footprint. Many submissions directly addressed the core question in the terms of the reference of the Assembly, in other words, how the state can make Ireland a leader in tackling climate change. In these submissions, many of the points raised were intertwined with comments about current government policy. As always, the submissions play an integral role in the development of our work programme, and some of our speakers tomorrow have made submissions to the Assembly. I am keen that the Assembly would make the best possible use of these submissions. The Secretariat is in the process of preparing a synopsis, if you like, a signpost document to give the members a sense of the main issues and range of perspectives which emerge in the submissions. In the meantime, to aid the citizens in accessing the submissions, the Secretariat has prepared a list of submissions received from NGOs, representative groups, advocacy groups, political parties, commercial entities and academics, and that list was included in your pack. I'm sure you've noticed it. The Secretariat is also, and of course it's available online, the Secretariat is also engaging with external partners to see how best these submissions can be used, both to assist the members of the Assembly in their deliberations and to inform national conversation on climate change broadly. So I have overstayed my welcome slightly, but at this stage you'll be glad that I've come to an end, and you'll be glad to hear Conor Murphy, who's going to give us a very interesting talk. Thank you very much.